Welcome to the Eastport Yacht Club Annapolis Environmental Committee's Annapolis-based Stewardship Earth Day 2021 presentation. And I'm thrilled that we have fellow Environmental Committee member and relatively new EYC member, Jackie Chao, as our moderator this evening. Jackie is Deputy City Manager for Resilience and Sustainability. Mayor Buckley created her position to elevate the environment to the city manager level and incorporate resilience and sustainability planning to all aspects of city services and plans. She was previously director of the Office of Environmental Policy, and she's been working in the environmental area for many years as an attorney, lobbyist, and executive director of the Chesapeake Legal Alliance, which provides pro bono legal support to groups working to protect and restore the Chesapeake Bay and its watershed. So we're great to have Jackie as a member of our committee and here to moderate this evening, and I'm going to turn it over to her.
All right, thanks, John, and thank you for having me tonight. I'm in very good company. I'm joined by some of my favorite environmental advocates and educators. We have Amy Clements, the president of the Spa Creek Conservancy, Tom Guay, the executive director of the Severn River Association, Jesse Iliff with the Arundel River Federation and the South River and Rhode River Riverkeeper, and Noelle Chao is the program coordinator with the Arundel County Watershed Stewards Academy. And the main point of this Bay Stewardship presentation is for us to share priorities and talk about how we can collaborate with one another and forwarding those priorities and how you can get involved. And I'll definitely do that for my short presentation on the city. So each of us will make about a 5-minute presentation, and then we will have everyone will have an opportunity to ask questions. We'll have a question and answer period following the presentation. So asking, I'll be timing everybody between 5 and 7 minutes for our respective presentations. So Virginia, if you can bring up my PowerPoint.
Okay. Here it comes. We'll get you started.
Okay. So first of all, well, happy Earth Day, everybody, tomorrow. We're having this a day early because everybody's doing things tomorrow that are Earth Day related. And Earth Day is, this year is particularly, brings home to us coming out of COVID. And one thing about COVID is it demonstrated how fast the Earth can rebound if we give it a chance. I think we've all noticed cleaner water, definitely better air quality. We drove less, we paddled more. We telecommuted, we didn't use as much electricity in our office buildings. And these are all habits that we need to continue as we come out of COVID. They demonstrated how some of these habits do work. They work for the environment, they work for our emotional and physical health, and they are good for habitat and humans and animals. Next slide, please. All right, so we're talking about collaboration. So I'm putting my information up there. First and foremost, you can contact me with your concerns, your ideas, your gripes, anything. And so my email and my phone number are there. As John mentioned, I'm part of the city manager's office now, with the recognition that climate change is driving the planning for the city and the environmental, economic, social, and cultural aspects. So we're incorporating resilience and sustainability planning into all aspects of city services and programs, and into the work of all our departments and offices. And I put a few of them up here so you could think about departments you might want to contact. Public Works, Planning and Zoning, that includes historic preservation and economic planning, emergency management, transportation, and rec and parks. Next slide, please. So my focus is on resiliency, which covers, as I just shown you, many different aspects other than environmental, because a resilient city is a city that can absorb and recover and prepare for future shocks, whether they're economic, environmental, social, or institutional. And a resilient city promotes sustainable development, the well-being of its residents and businesses. It includes everyone in planning, and it includes economic growth and innovation. And I've listed here all of the areas that I cover. Where I'm focused, especially this year, is on zero emissions and zero waste. And also environmental equity and making sure that we are addressing the environment, completing restoration projects, putting EV chargers, et cetera, in some of our disadvantaged and low-income communities that don't always get treated first with city services. So we're bringing environmental equity up to the forefront. I'll talk a little bit about some of the programs we're doing later in my presentation. Next slide, please. So some of our 2021 priorities is when I talked about zero emissions, and part of that is to install EV charging units, the infrastructure for EV vehicles all over the city. We started doing that at Truxton Park, at the Pitmoyer Recreation Center. We have chargers going into Gott's Garage. They will eventually go into Hillman Garage when we rebuild. We're looking at sites downtown and in residential areas. And we are starting to turn the city fleet over to electric, and where it's not possible to do electric, hybrid vehicles, plug-ins, and eventually buses. There will be money available to the city in this coming year to buy EV buses. We're really looking forward to that. I'm also working on a lot of resilience efforts, sea level rise, resilience hubs, community gardens and markets. There will be a community farmers market in Eastport coming very soon. We're looking at shoreline protection, elevating roads and sidewalks, energy efficiency, not only in government buildings, but for the community, and protecting our cultural resources, which are historic buildings and historic sites, which many of them are very vulnerable to sea level rise right now. Of course, we also will address water quality with stream river restorations and reducing impervious surfaces. We're looking at all types of different transportation, promoting bike trails, pedestrian and access, making the city more pedestrian and bike friendly, but also encouraging bike and scooter and even boat transit as ways to commute to work. We're focusing on a litter and waste reduction. We have a But It's Plastic campaign that Annapolis Green is working with us on to implement. This is addressing cigarette butt pollution. It's a behavior change and public education campaign. You're going to see people on the street with public education. We will have some TerraCycle collection of the cigarette butts, which can be recycled. And the city is engaging in 2 pilot programs, one with Annapolis Green, which will be a fixed site at Truxton Park for 6 months to bring compost to it. In the picture, we're showing our pumpkin composting we did right after Halloween and after Thanksgiving in conjunction with Annapolis Green and Veterans Compost. And we diverted 5 tons of just pumpkins from the city landfill. We also are going to be the city will be engaging in a neighborhood pilot program, curbside composting program, as we look at building a citywide program and a composting facility on the old Annapolis landfill that's adjacent to the solar park. We are establishing our greenhouse gas emissions goals. We've done an inventory for the city government buildings. Next, we'll be looking at community greenhouse gas emissions. An inventory was done in 2006. It's really outdated, so we're doing it this year to set our baseline and our future goals. And we're working really hard on increasing our tree canopy. We are launching Replant Annapolis, which is the sister program to Replant Arundel, in partnership with the Watershed Stewards Academy. And this is a program where communities plant trees, and they are trained to plant trees in their communities. And we're also going to be helping out our lower income communities to get involved with this program so that the city can meet its 2036 goal of a 50% tree canopy. The mayor will be announcing that program tomorrow during Earth Day, when we are doing a tree planting in the Robin Wood housing community. And lastly, environmental issues and concerns are woven throughout the 2020 comprehensive plan, which is called Annapolis Ahead 2040. And the Department of Planning and Zoning spearheads that, but I'm working very closely with them to incorporate environmental concerns. And market calendars, Eric Lashinsky is the Chief of Comprehensive Planning, is holding a meeting directed just at environmental issues for the evening of May the 5th from 7 to 9. Eric has sent out a hold the date invitation to stakeholders and people that have expressed an interest in participating in such a meeting. But if you would like to participate, you can email me, and at the end, and I think that's my next slide, you can go ahead and flip that, Virginia. I have Eric Lashinsky's contact information. Yes. So Eric Lashinsky, I have his email and his phone number. If you're interested in participating in that meeting, contact Eric. So that's one of the ways you can get involved is with the comprehensive plan. You can also participate and replant Annapolis. We are doing the planning and all the things I have to do to get that program running in the city so that we can start recruiting what they call tree troopers to participate in the spring of 2022. We can train our tree troopers to start planting in the fall of 2022. So look for information to come from the Watershed Stewards Academy in the city on getting involved in Replant Annapolis. And other ways you can get involved with the city, you can contact me anytime with your ideas and your concerns, but also you could join the Annapolis Conservancy Board when we have openings on the board, or the Environmental Commission. Other boards and commissions that get involved with environmental issues are the Planning Commission, Transportation Board, and Historic Preservation Commission. There's an intersection of climate change and historic preservation, and changes will be coming in rules and regulations around historic preservation driven by climate change. Overall, the city's goals are, zero emissions and zero waste, but also, of course, protecting our water quality and our air quality and cleaning our lands, protecting habitat, and establishing green corridors. We think we can come out of COVID stronger and better. There's a strong recognition now that the environment and the economy are strongly linked. We used to have people tell us they didn't want us to take away parking spaces on Main Street in order to have outside dining. Now all the businesses are on board. So it can show, like, when you encounter something like a pandemic, how people's attitudes can change and how there can be a real appreciation for the environment and how it sustains us in times like the pandemic, our physical and emotional well-being, as well as our the need to recreate and be outdoors. So I encourage you to call both me and Eric and get involved with the city. We're always welcome to your ideas, and we want to hear your concerns as well. And with that, I will turn the presentation over to Amy Clements, the president of the Spa Creek Conservancy.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone, and thanks, Virginia, and everyone at EYC for having this forum again. As Virginia reminded me, I mean, I knew it anyway, but we, Kids on the Creek, which we are planning for this summer, August 21st, if people want to put on their calendars, came out of the first stewardship forum that we had in 2017, when I spoke to Virginia and some people from Severn Sailing Association about getting kids with no access to the water on the water. And so we've had really successful Kids on the Creek events for the 2 years. And then last year, of course, we had to cancel it because of COVID, but we're planning it again this summer. And we've probably gotten, I think the first year was like 150 people out in the water, and the second year about 125 or 130. So, and exactly the kids that we want to get there. The buses, they bring kids from Eastport Terrace and Harbor House, and from the Boys and Girls Clubs and from Parole. So it's a great day, and we're really looking forward to it, and keeping our fingers crossed that COVID gets out of the way for us. So I wanted to follow up on something Jackie talked about, which was Replant Annapolis, because one of our goals for this year is, a program that we've just started up again is our business stewardship program, which the Conservancy started about, 7 or 8 years ago. And this specific project this year is focused on Outer West Street from Chinkapin Round Road out to Route 2, we've now walked the site, walked West Street with community members, and I've walked it with an arborist to look at businesses, look at opportunities for trees to be planted along that West Street corridor, which is a total concrete dead zone. So unfortunately, we can't put anything in the sidewalks, and we can't put, there are so many places where no trees can go and no vegetation can go. So we identified probably 15 businesses along that stretch that we've hired a consultant to go and do a business outreach to these businesses and begin the process of telling them why it's in their best interest and our, everyone's best interest to have trees planted. Businesses have a really hard time. For some reason, they think trees discourage people from coming from their businesses because they can't find them. And nowadays people aren't looking for signs. They're not going, oh, I think I'm going to go to that dry cleaner over there. Everybody's looking at their phone. And so they don't really need to see the huge signs anymore. So we're hoping, if anybody has any great examples of before and after businesses that look so much better after trees were planted there, that would be great. I'm looking for that right now so that we can talk some of these businesses into that. So we're hoping to be able to, I don't know if we can use the Replant Annapolis funding for those initiatives, but that would be really great. We are starting in May, our sixth year of water testing. And we have been doing this in the creek we're now doing it 11 sites in Spa Creek. And we are partnering with the CAPSUP and the Live Water Foundation to do 4 sites over in Back Creek. And so we're combining those. We'll be combining those on a map for our weekly testing, so everybody can look at those. I have some preliminary numbers from last year that I got from Tammy Demansky, and as all the other water testers on here know, last year was not so great for our for water quality. Bacteria was a little bit higher in our spots, but still it was below the cutoff, which is for Spa Creek, which is good. Water clarity was a decreased, dissolved oxygen was decreased, total suspended solids increased, nitrogen increased, and phosphorus doubled. And trying to figure out why that is, and maybe Jesse or Tom know something about that, and maybe it has to do with the big algal bloom. I don't know. But we're hoping to get more information from Tammy on Monday night, April 26th on Facebook. We'll be having our State of the Creek report with Tammy Demansky from Anne Arundel Community College. And we're also starting this year, we've already started a new specific water testing project, like a stormwater sampling project that Jason Burkholder, who works with Tammy Demansky and does our water testing in the summer, he is doing storm sampling. He's done it for one storm in March, and you need a storm that has a 1/4 inch of rain, and he's taking water samples from 3 spots in Hawkins Cove, one at the bottom of the stream, one sample at the bottom of the pier there, the public pier, and one from the bottom of our board member, Patrick Denker's dock. He's out near the end of Hawkins Cove. And so we're hoping that this will show us what exactly is coming into the creek from these sites, and how the nutrients and bacteria are moving through the water, through the whole system. So we should have some number. I don't have any numbers, although the bacteria was high apparently, but everything's still at the lab, and so I don't have any information yet about the first storm. But we're very excited about that. That was Jason's idea, to try this specific project in one specific place in this little cove. So it should be interesting to see what those results are. And another piece of that is Patrick Denker has put a weather station on the end of his dock. And he lives in Hawkins Cove. And his weather station is hooked up to, what's it called? Ambient. You guys will probably know this. Ambient weather. So if you go to the ambient weather dashboard, Hawkins Cove comes up and it shows everything. It shows how much rain, it shows the wind speed, it shows the tides, it's going to show historical data. And so he was very excited to be putting this in, but this is also going to be a big help for our stormwater sampling, because Jason doesn't live here. He can get the notice that, oh, we just had a 1/4 inch of rain. So, come down and start your sampling. Oh, the sampling, for the stormwater is immediately after the rain, and then 2 hours later, 4 hours later, and 8 hours later. So we're doing all the same tests that we do weekly, plus organic carbon in that test. And then our last, do I have one more? Can I talk one more thing? We're going to be working with the communities that are the upland communities of Truxton Cove, which is all the townhouses and condo communities off between Hilltop and Forest Drive, to start doing some stormwater retrofits there for the channel that feeds into Hawkins Cove, because hopefully eventually that will be a big restoration project in the creek. And so that's all I've got.
Okay, great. Thank you, Amy. And remember, everyone, you can ask questions about what Amy's talked about and anything else about Spot Creek in the Q&A portion of our program. And I'll do that. I'll hold up like 2 fingers when you have about 2 minutes left, 1 minute left, everybody.
Thank you.
All right. So next we're going to move on to Tom Guay, is the Executive Director of the Severn River Association.
All right, can you hear me now? Everybody, all right, great. How you doing, everyone? Thanks a lot for joining us. Thanks, Virginia, for getting me involved and getting SRA involved here. Give me a second, folks. I got a little slideshow for you. So let's see, we'll make this work. Bingo. Does that look all right? Okay, let me get rid of all of us people here. So I'm with the Severn River Association, and I'm sure you guys recognize these beautiful blue waters of our river. That's not an anomaly. I think it's an optical illusion of some sort, with one of our early drone pictures of the Route 50 bridge. So I want to talk about a couple of things that we can do for Earth Day, and simple things that everybody can do. Somebody mentioned earlier that you're looking for ways of partnering, and oh, come on, work. Okay, you guys, we've been around since 1911, if you didn't know that, and our goals, good fishing and good swimming would be grand. One of the ways to join us would be to help us out with water quality monitoring. We have a program now, we're entering our 4th year, and it's driven by volunteers. We have over 50 people who are helping us. We have 4 tours a week, and we are monitoring the entire river. We're going to have 50 stations that we visit this year, and we break it down into 6 quarters. We do 4 quarters a week, and 2 of the quarters we do every other week. But the idea is that we're trying to get science-based, data-driven programs in which we get a better understanding of what's happening to the Severn River. And this is a great way for people to help out and volunteer, because not only do you get a fun boat ride, you get to explore the river, find out different areas of the Severn River. And we're going everywhere from Lake Ogleton all the way up to the top of the river and all the creeks in between. We're going to be visiting 17 creeks this year. So it's kind of an aggressive program. And so the way the program works is that we have crews on every boat, and we have a team leader. That person is up there in the left-hand corner. That's Mackenzie. She was our intern for the last 2 years while she works on her environmental studies degree at Duquesne University. She's writing everything down. And the whole point of this writing down exercise is everything is driven by data sheets. So all the volunteers come out. We write everything down. You can see the woman in the middle there with the SRA sign. She's lowering the probe. That's her job on the thing, to take the probe, go to the bottom and control the depth. And then you can see the bottom pictures. We have Joni, we have Doug. They're holding the YSI device. So is Brianna there sitting down at the top. And the idea is that we do everything out loud. So Brianna will say, okay, we have so many milligrams per liter of oxygen at this depth, and we'll go through the whole routine. The reason we say everything out loud, it's one, to slow the process down. It does reduce mistakes. And it also involves the entire crew, so they get used to hearing, oh, the salinity level is X, Y, and Z, or the oxygen level is this. And then they slowly begin to track what's going on in the river. They understand the value of what 5 milligrams or more of oxygen would mean compared to less than 2 milligrams. So less than 2 milligrams a liter is a marker for us. That's the beginning of a dead zone. That's really bad news. And over time, everybody gets to understand and participate. And just so you get to see on that map there, these are all the stations we had last year. We haven't updated the map just yet, but we visit every one of those stations. We create a profile of the water. And last year's story was the same story as 2019, except it was even worse in 2020, that we had a persistent dead zone. I don't know if you can see my arrow here, but this dead zone came all the way down the river, right to the Route 50 bridge. And it stayed there most of the summer. And we were able to track it inside all of the creeks here. And this year, when we release our State of the Severn report soon, we'll also be releasing creek by creek report cards. And so every creek, everybody who lives on a creek, get an idea of what's been going on in their area. This year, we were able to start. We started monitoring April 1st, and it's cold on the river. Even though it looks bright and sunny, the water's cold. So we're out there, though, starting to collect. You can see here, towards the end of the year, you have to wear, dress up a little bit. But these are more of our volunteers. The woman here in the middle, where my arrow is circling, that's our current Chesapeake Conservation Corps member. That's Emmy McGady. She's running our water quality program now. She organizes all the tours. She's making sure that we get all the data collected. All of our data is then shared with the Chesapeake Monitoring Cooperative. This is a program called the Chesapeake Data Explorer. So all these people, everybody is contributing to the scientific understanding of our river. And this is the story I mentioned last year and this year. It's this dead zone. It's just everywhere. And it's fueled largely by algae blooms. And how do algae blooms show up? Well, that's coming from nitrogen. And where does that come from? It's largely coming from fertilizer. It's coming from septic runoff. But man, the worst thing you can do is fertilize your lawn in the springtime. And anyway, it covers all that area, and we'll see what happens this year. We haven't noticed a dead zone yet, but the water's still pretty cold. So activity has not really picked up. Another way you guys can enjoy the environment and really commune with nature is to join our SAV Navy. This is a group of people in kayaks and canoes, and the job is to identify all the underwater grasses in the Severn River. We have anywhere from 200 to 400 acres of underwater grasses. We're rather blessed in that regard. And so we created the SAV Navy. This is Susan here. She's out there. She's got her data sheet. That little orange thing is connected to her Garmin GPS device. And so every stop she makes, we take a GPS reading, we take samples of the underwater grass, and then we identify them, write it all down on a data sheet. And then we're able to upload all that into a GIS mapping program so that we're able to create a longer term vision of what kind of grasses we have now, what kind of grasses are coming in. Are we seeing change in the mix? 2 years ago, we had a lot of redhead grass, for example. Last year, we started noticing that these big areas of redhead grass now have some healthy populations of the widgeon grass coming in. So we're tracking that transition. We don't know if that's good or bad or natural, but it's happening. So we're tracking the data now. And you can enjoy Earth Day every day of the year when you're out there helping us out with the underwater grasses. And this is a relaxed thing. We use these canoes and kayaks because all of our grasses are in the shallow waters along the shorelines. Everything is less than 3 feet. So it requires a shallow boat, and it's a quiet, relaxing way to do it. Visit your creeks, visit your river. Another way we are celebrating Earth Day every year is that we are, yeah, are you almost done?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're repopulating the river with oysters. These locations are all the spots where we have reconstituted oyster reefs on historic places. So maybe in 100 years, we'll have enough oysters to filter every day. And one of the other things that we are introducing last year and expanding this year is the floating classroom. This is where we can take up the 4 students out. We teach them all about underwater quality. We teach them about oysters. We teach them about habitat. And then we take them to the underwater grasses and we get their hands-on experience. They pull the grasses out, they sample them, they learn how to identify them, and they get to, enjoy a boat ride. And there you go. All right. So.
All right. Thank you, Tom. All great programs. And I know that the city is excited to get involved with your floating classroom program when the Stanton Center through Rec and Parks. And next we have Jesse Iliff, who is the Riverkeeper with the Arundel Rivers Federation.
Thanks, Jackie, and thank you, EYC, for inviting me to speak tonight. We have a lot of exciting things going on south of town. As Jackie mentioned, our organization, Arundel Rivers Federation, sees after the Southwest and Rhode rivers. And just like the Severn River Association, we also have a monitoring program that began at the beginning of the month. I was out on the West and Rhode rivers this morning. I was able to finish up just before we had a bit of weather come in, but for the first time in my life, I was actually hit in the eyeball with a hailstone going 20 miles an hour in a small boat. Which was an interesting experience. Thankfully, I was able to back off the throttle before I had to sit down and compose myself a little bit. But we do that to keep everyone apprised of what's going on in our rivers. In 2020, we had the same sort of small downturn in water quality that the other rivers in the county did. We went from C pluses to C minuses in a few instances. So still kind of middle of the road, lots of room for improvement. But also we do a lot of advocacy work at our organization. As many of you know, the legislative session just wrapped up 9 days ago. We had a couple of bills that we supported during session that passed that we're very excited about. One was a bill to improve the data upon which stormwater management regulations are built. So some of you might have heard of things like a 1-year storm or a 10-year storm, and those are the metrics that people must build capacity to handle the rainfall of a 1-year storm. But the frequency of those storms was built off of data that were collected in the early 1990s. And so a lot has changed since then, and we felt our organization and others felt that it was time for an update. And thankfully, our Senator Sarah Elfreth agreed and sponsored the bill that ultimately passed through the legislature and is before Governor Hogan. So we're excited about that one. Another one was a bill that will require the Departments of Environment and Natural Resources to report on their enforcement data electronically on the internet. These data are already publicly available, but you would have to file a Public Information Act request with one of those agencies to figure out, for instance, if there were a fisheries violation on the river, or if a construction site that had sediment leaking into a creek was operating in compliance with its permit or not. And now, once the bill goes into effect, it will be something you can point and click on one of those departments' websites and figure out what's going on in your local neck of the waters. Throughout the year, we always have general enforcement matters. I mentioned earlier construction sites and fisheries things. Those sorts of things crop up all the time. We're keeping an eye on those, and I encourage anyone who isn't aware already to get familiar with reporting avenues to the city of Annapolis, to the county. The county, for instance, has its 311 app that makes it easy to report any incident that you might see out on the waters to appropriate personnel. And actually, I want to give a big shout out to our friends to the north, the Magathie River Association, for prodding and pressing the Department of Environment until they finally took up a lawsuit against an egregious violator of stormwater up in the Lake Waterford area of the Magathie watershed. Big win for the Magathie up there. And that's the kind of stuff that our watershed organizations are always pressing for, and we always welcome information and tips from people in the watersheds about places that need a little bit more scrutiny in terms of their environmental compliance. Coming up soon on Memorial Day weekend, we're going to be launching our pump out boat, which will service all 3 of our rivers, free of charge pump outs, funded by the Department of Natural Resources. So you can visit our website if you're ever down on the Southwestern Road rivers and need a pump out, let us know, we'll come to you. We are also starting our bacteria monitoring program the first week, unofficial weekend of summer, Memorial Day weekend, where we go to swimming beaches around the waters and take weekly bacteria samples to advise our residents of the bacteria levels in the rivers, where they go. Our restoration program has had a couple of projects come to fruition recently, one on Beards Creek on the South River in the Annapolis Landing community, and another down at Harrington Harbor on Herring Bay, 2 stream restoration projects that should be delivering cleaner and cleaner water as the projects settle and mature over the next couple of years. So we're excited about that. I'm sure that many of the people on this call are aware that the County Council has been deliberating over Anne Arundel County's general development plan these past couple of weeks. We have weighed in on the GDP in a couple of different instances. Monday night's council meeting was a real marathon council meeting, went until almost midnight. We testified in favor of some of the new provisions in this general development plan that we feel will be protective of natural resources and our communal environment here in the county. So there's always a lot going on the advocacy front. Monitoring has been really interesting so far this spring. Today, there was a strong southerly breeze, and I noticed really impressive, and last week actually, really impressive water clarity in north-facing creeks that are sheltered from the southern breeze. But then in the creeks that are facing south, the clarity is not nearly as impressive. So to give you a frame of reference, there was more than a meter, almost 1.5 meters of clarity in some of our creeks that face north, but our creeks that face south, we're looking at 0.5 meter. So almost 3 times as clear in the leeward creeks when there's a southerly breeze. So that's something that we're going to be keeping an eye on. It's really a discrepancy that we haven't seen quite as strong before. But there's always a lot going on, and I encourage any of you that are interested in learning any more about these programs to reach out to me or anyone in our shop. We're always happy to hear from folks, and thanks again for the opportunity to talk tonight. Looking forward to the Q&A.
Thank you, Jesse. And Jesse raised the issue about MDE and updates they need to make. And that's something that we have heard from the engineers at MDE, Department of the Environment, that they will be updating their stormwater treatment and guidance and criteria. It hasn't been updated in many, many years. It's something they're working on right now. And it may come out next year for those of you in the stormwater treatment and monitoring area. All right, so next, our final panelist is Noelle Chao with the Anne Arundel County Watershed Stewards Academy.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Virginia and EYC, for inviting me this evening, and happy Earth Day Eve, everyone. So as Jackie mentioned, I'm the program coordinator for WSA, and I'm actually also a watershed steward who trained in class 10 back in 2017. So you can think of me as one of those people who starts out as a volunteer for an organization and ends up drinking so much Kool-Aid that they join it and decide never to leave ever, ever, ever. And for those of you who might not be familiar with WSA, my organization's cornerstone is our certification course that trains individuals to become leaders in their communities for environmental action. So every year we train a new group of stewards who learn how to install rainscaping projects using native plants that help prevent erosion and give stormwater a chance to slow down, spread out, and soak in. Our stewards also learn best practices for engaging their fellow community members, and they inspire their friends and neighbors to adopt habits that will help reduce the amount of pollution entering our local waterways. We think of ourselves as a hub of connections at WSA. We connect folks to the people they need to know in local government, folks at environmental nonprofits, at funding organizations, so they can develop and deliver the green projects that will really make a difference. I wanted to share two things this evening that my organization has worked on recently that I am so very excited about. And one of them is building partnerships with Anne Arundel County Public Libraries. Now, for years, WSA has promoted our certification course by hosting information sessions at public libraries, including the Eastport Annapolis Neck Library. But in recent years, we've begun increasing the amount of program we're doing at libraries. We've begun training librarians in our certification course, and we've even started installing and maintaining projects at libraries too. Just wanted to give a little plug. The librarians we've trained, they've developed great earth-friendly environmental program for kids, adults, and families. And we actually have a steward in the current class whose capstone project is this Saturday. It's a 3-part series of virtual events on Saturday in celebration of Earth Day. Programs obviously are free. There are going to be giveaways, and there's a bonus Project Clean Stream event that's going to be held at the Odenton Library in 2 weeks. So I'll throw that link to those events in the chat later, but you should definitely check that out if you've got time. I think of libraries personally, and I love books, so I may be a little biased here, but I think of libraries as these great community centers where you can reach so many different audiences that people in our world might not normally get to reach. And so through these librarians that we're building relationships, through these different library sites that we're building relationships with, I feel like WSA and the organizations that we're connected to, who are all working for a cleaner Chesapeake Bay, can really leverage this relationship to basically get in touch with so many members of so many different communities that we may not be reaching yet. I did want to share one special thing that we did last year in fall 2020. We actually had 2 stewards in our last class work on their capstone project at the Eastport Annapolis Neck Library. One of them actually represented his congregation there, Temple Beth Shalom. We had learned at WSA in late 2019 that Eastport Annapolis Library was experiencing just not great water quality. They'd had flooding, and they were looking into getting some rain barrels. When our team did the site visit, we discovered that their problems were not going to be solvable by rain barrels. They're much bigger than that. But we also realized, talking to library staff, that there was this bioretention on their property that had not been cared for in years. It's basically become a community dumping ground. There were tires, an abandoned fridge. It was awful, and they needed help figuring out what to do with it and how to clean it up. And the 2 stewards who took on that project and who did an amazing job were able to get buy-in from the county and from other partners so that they could do the work of cleaning out all the trash, getting all the invasives out, and then replanting in the fall with more natives that would help that project function better in the future. So I think that's just a great example of one of the ways that our library partnerships are helping us basically not just deliver great programming, but also work on great projects as well. The other thing that I wanted to mention, and this felt especially important since, as many of you will know, this is the day after the jury delivered their verdict on Derek Chauvin. I wanted to share some of the work my organization is doing on diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, what's commonly referred to as DEIJ. WSA has been doing this kind of work for many years, but with our new strategic plan and along with the social justice momentum that has been going on since last summer, we've realized that we really need to reassess our approach to how we're thinking about programmatic change. And as people from across our country, from all different backgrounds, have condemned the systemic racism that's undergirding our society, we feel like we really have an opportunity to take action at the local level to make a difference. So our organization is beginning the process of hiring consultants, one for a large-scale organization-wide DEIJ effort, the other for the Replant Anne Arundel program that just Jackie mentioned a little bit earlier. We're hoping that those consultants will help give us guidance on how to better engage some of the communities in our county and in the city of Annapolis that have not yet been reached yet by other environmental organizations. And we know this is going to require lots of listening, and not just listening, but really understanding what those partners that we desperately want to have really need and would want from us if they were to partner with us. So through these efforts, we're hoping that we can better invest our energy and resources in ways that are equitable, inclusive, and which will help us accomplish the goals of our 5-year strategic plan. We're hoping to increase the diversity among not just our primary base of volunteer master watershed stewards, but among the professionals we hire for full-time and contractual work. And we're hoping that we can adopt and implement innovative methods for engaging new constituents and hopefully share these methods with our partners across the watershed. So thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you, Noelle. And I can't say enough good things about the Watershed Stewards Academy program. I was a member of the first class in 2008. And and Amy was there too, yes. And they actually
Diane and John are in class 12.
All right. So before we open it up to everybody else for questions, I wanted to give the panelists an opportunity to ask questions of one another. And I want to jump in first. I want to ask Noelle, when is the next application period opening up for people who want to become a watershed steward?
That is such a great question, and I would tell you if I knew. But one of the things that we're trying to figure out, because we're still living through COVID times, is just when it's going to make the most sense for us to host that class. Our class 13, instead of beginning last October, as it traditionally would have, did not begin until January of 2021, so just a few months ago, and it has been held almost exclusively online through Zoom. Very, very new to us, very, very new to most of the stewards who are in the class who are experiencing this new way of us training people for the first time. And we are still trying to figure out, based on the conditions on the ground, whether it's going to make sense for us to begin the next course in fall, as we traditionally would have, or wait again and do a completely virtual start next January. So anybody who's interested, check out our website, and you can also contact me and put you on our list and give you the details as soon as I have them.
Okay, thank you, Noelle. And then I have a question for Tom and Amy and Jesse. All of you do water quality monitoring programs. What is the age? Is there a certain minimum age to participate in those programs?
Well, on our program, we can take, and we have taken high school, college, and then a lot of people who are unencumbered with jobs and careers during the day. Because we're going out Monday, you know, we go out Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So most younger people are in the middle of their career, so they can't help us out. So we rely on those unencumbered types who want to have some fun with us. Our floating classroom, I'll take children down to 4th grade, and we've had success with 4th graders on up. They seem to they understand right away what photosynthesis is and why oysters want to breathe, and they get it right away. So I'm comfortable with the 4th on up.
Okay. Amy?
We don't have volunteer. Well, we have one volunteer, Patrick Denker, who goes out with Jason, and Jason is paid by Anne Arundel Community College and with the stipend from us and actually from EYC, because he does a little program for their camp there every Thursday. So we used to use all volunteers, and then since we're doing the middle of the creek and so many sites, it has to be by boat. And we just, you know, in our program, it was just easier to have the 2 people do it and do all the sites. And so we don't use kids for that. We have people ask, but we just don't do it.
And for Kids on the Creek, what's the age group you're seeking for that program?
That was pretty much open to all kids below. We didn't have many, maybe we had some young teenagers, I would guess, but mostly if the youngest child, Virginia, do you remember what age we let on the boats? If they were with their parents, you know, we had kids like maybe 4 to, I think, I can't remember. I'm sorry, I'm blanking. I don't remember if it was under 4 we didn't allow. What was
Okay.
do you remember, Virginia?
Right. Well, 6 was they had to have
Under-
parents with them.
Under
Under
6.
6,
Right,
and
right.
under 8, excuse me. And then you're right. We didn't take below 4. And
Okay. Yeah.
And Jesse, do you involve volunteers with your monitoring?
We do have volunteers periodically, and each summer I have been fortunate enough to, we've had younger kids come out with us. I would say though that in order to make sure that the work you're doing is done in such a way that the data are reliable, you'd want somebody from middle school at least, because I've taken my own kids. I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. I've taken them out on the boat with me plenty of times. Generally, after 2 hours, they're hating life. And also, you know, if I say, hey, Bax, drop this Secchi disc over the side and tell me how many knots you count, he'll be like 4. No, wait, 7. Wait, I don't know. I don't really care. You know, and so then I've got to do it anyway. So.
Okay, fair enough. All right, do any of the other panelists have questions for one another?
Could I just pop in there? Jesse's point about 2 hours. Even though we're working with a somewhat older clientele, we're only out there for 3, maybe 4 hours tops with adults. We all sort of run out of gas after that time. But I can't imagine trying to do it with my own kids. Oh, Jesse, you're brave.
Any other panelists, questions for one another? Okay, then we will move on. I'm going to open up my view to gallery, and if you raise your hand, we can recognize you, and Virginia can open your microphone. And I can see anyone who's raising their hand.
And actually, Jackie, I have set it so people can unmute on their own. So let's let Jackie recognize you before you unmute.
Yeah, not everyone has their camera turned on, so I can't, you know, obviously I won't be able to recognize you if I can't see you.
Turn your cameras on if you want to raise your hand.
I'm scrolling through here and looking for anyone with a raised hand. So, oh, okay. There's the butlers are raising their hands wildly. Diane.
I had to unmute first.
All right. Hi, everyone. Diane Butler here. I wanted to ask, I guess this is a question for Jackie. Can you tell us or give us an update on the no discharge zone? I know we have David Barker who's on this call, and you know this is his baby, and he's done so much work on it. We're all dying to know where it stands with this more friendly administration. We're hoping that we're getting closer to getting that all put to bed and signed. So what do you need, if anything?
Okay, so just for those of you who don't know what it is, the no discharge zone would be for all of Anne Arundel County waterways, which include Annapolis. And the Severn River Association, when it was Back Creek Conservancy at the time, David Barker put in an enormous amount of effort with the city and the county, and with DNR, who helped a lot too. But David was really the one writing and gathering all the scientific information that went into a great application. And so you would not be able to discharge untreated waste into the waters of Anne Arundel County. They would all be designated as a no discharge zone. So the application is going to be approved. We think approved is really, really good chances. That's all indications that it will be approved imminently. That's what I'm told by DNR. I think COVID has delayed things a bit with the federal government, quite a bit. It was approved by, recommended for approval by Maryland Department of Natural Resources, then by the Maryland Department of the Environment, and then it made its way to EPA Region 3, which was recommending for approval, but put it out for notice and comment as they do. and that period has long expired, and they're drafting the final approval. So that should be coming out anytime now. We had hoped to have it in place so that we could do public education around it for the spring boating season that SRA is helping us with. Helping when I say us, the city and the county. But it's been a bit delayed, so hopefully very, very soon.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you, David, if you can hear us.
Let's see, anyone else? I'm kind of scrolling through because I can't see everyone at once. I hope I'm not missing anybody. I don't see anyone else right now. I've got to have people with questions out there.
Another question here.
I have
Okay.
another question, if you don't mind. This one's for Noelle.
Okay.
Noelle, I know that Plant Arundel has done an amazing job, even through COVID, of getting trees planted. Can you give us an overview of how many trees you've been able to plant this past year?
I can give that to you in just a minute if I pull it up. Since Replant is not one of the programs I manage, I'll have to cheat and look at it online. But yeah, if you give me just a second, I can pull up some of the notes and share them with everybody.
I can tell you what Suzanne
Yeah,
was putting in her press release. She said that there were over 4,000 trees planted with 300 volunteers last year. Is that accurate? That's what she showed me her press release today.
That sounds
So
good.
the city is in the process. We're sitting in the process of setting goals in, for our program that will begin in 2022.
And it sounds like you're going to be working together with the county. Is that right?
Well, there may be some instances where, you know, the areas don't observe city county boundaries, and it may make sense to work with the county in some of the projects. And maybe Noelle can answer this question. Amy raised the question of whether businesses or a group of businesses or a business sector might be an applicant. Could they be considered a community that could participate in the program?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as long as a community is willing to have somebody step up and have somebody trained in the Tree Trooper program, or if they're able to secure somebody who has trained in the Tree Trooper program and advocate for them on their behalf, then absolutely, they should think about applying.
Even if it's not in the city, Noelle?
Not right now. Until the city program is official and all those details get squared away, then right now it has to be an entity in Anne Arundel County.
Right. So we'll be putting together, I have to do all the logistics behind the scenes to get the program approved, et cetera. We would, if we get things in order, it would be plenty of time to do this, to start receiving applications for projects in the spring of 2022. Then the city groups could participate then. I should mention one other initiative the mayor is launching in the next few days. I'll hold up the t-shirt if you can see this. Green Works program in Annapolis. It's part of the mayor's Green New Deal. This is a program to help lower income young people, probably late teens to 30 years old, acquire some environmental job skills like landscaping skills and landscaping maintenance skills and that sort of thing, to involve them in everything from building bike trails and improving hiking trails to cleanups and maintenance and planting of all kinds, landscaping. And this is be a program where the participants would be paid. And so the details are going to be worked out. We have a cleanup on West Street planned for Saturday, but unfortunately I think we're going to be rained out, and we had hoped to have about at least 10 participants for the Green Works program on Saturday, but we will reschedule that event. Yes, Amy.
So how is that being funded?
We are determining how we're going to fund that. We do have some recovery money that we might be able to use from COVID recovery. And otherwise, it's going to have to be presented during this budget cycle that we're in right now, the one we're working through right now for FY22.
Could I make a suggestion?
Yes,
that,
Amy.
if it, becomes a successful program, that we train these kids or young adults, whoever is in the program, about the maintenance of the BMPs, like rain gardens and, the restoration, the stream restorations and all that kind of thing. Because we used to have, Reverend Calhoun had
Right.
a study group and who he trained, and that, I know that's hard to keep those things together. I get
Right.
it, but it would be a big help.
Provide some job skills for real jobs, but that we might interest some of these young people in pursuing, degrees in landscape architecture and other landscaping type of jobs. Okay. Yes, John Butler.
Jesse, does the rivers, the South River and Rhode River, the rivers your Riverkeeper on, do they have dead zone issues to the extent that the big one that we've been seeing a couple years on the Severn River?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say it's not as extensive as they see up on the Severn River. And I think a big reason for that is the shapes. Do you know how the Severn is so long and skinny and then balloons out at Round Bay? I think that shape prohibits a lot of the tidal flushing that we see in the roughly wedge-shaped South River. And then the Rhode and West share a mouth, and they are, first of all, they're just not nearly as long as the Severn. We're talking 2.5 miles, maybe 3 miles tops to the very, very headwaters of tidal reaches. So they get a lot more tidal flushing, which I think makes a difference. Plus, they're so much shallower, and dissolved oxygen is much lower at greater depths. And, so much of the Rhode and the West Rivers don't even get above 6.5, 7 feet at high tide. And so the wind mixes the water column up a lot more than it will when you're talking 20, 25, 30 feet of depth, like you see in places in the Severn and the South Rivers. So there are places in the South River where bottom dissolved oxygen will be consistently anoxic or hypoxic. So, hypoxic means below 2 milligrams per liter of oxygen. Anoxic means below 0.2, basically a flat zero. And generally, we won't see it top to bottom. The top meter or two of depth in the rivers will have some DO, but once you get below 6 feet of depth in the South, generally like upstream of the Riva Road Bridge, you're not going to see dissolved oxygen between middle of July through the end of August, once you get below 4 or 5, maybe 6 feet of depth. And so it's a problem, because that means fish can't swim in the lower, cooler waters, but they also can't swim in the high waters that have more dissolved oxygen because they're so warm. So it makes this kind of sandwiching effect where the layer that the fish can be comfortable in gradually squeezes tighter over the course of the summer, reaches a bottom trough of habitability, usually in the beginning, middle of August, and then kind of climbs back up into more hospitable water quality as the weather cools off.
I'm surprised no one has asked this question yet, but it happens every year. We see the fish kills, and you saw big ones down there in the Spa, in Spa Creek and on the Severn. And Tom, I know that the SRA put out some information about what it's caused by every year. That brown and red color the water takes on around the same time. Could you speak to that, Tom?
Yeah, the color thing that you're talking about is the algae bloom that we all experienced, and it was pretty intense in the Severn River and also in Back Creek, where we park our boat. That algae bloom last year lasted for almost 8 weeks, and then we were pretty sure we saw the algae bloom coming back in the fall. And these things are fueled by nitrogen overloading. So there's your culprit right there. I think that because we had such an intense algal bloom last year that we probably lost half of our underwater grass population. So 2 years ago, we had 400 acres. When the final numbers come out soon, I bet you we're down to 200 acres again. And we just noticed it because the year before we had all this new grass and all these new areas, and all the older areas were thicker and bigger than they used to be. And then last year, when the tide finally went away and we went back out to find the grasses, we didn't find all that new grass growth. It was all gone. And what we did see is some of the well-established beds had survived in the shallowest of waters. So I don't know.
All right, thank you, Tom.
I'd just like to follow up on what he said for 1 second, which is the nitrogen overloading is the culprit. And that's true because when you have these microscopic algae, they block out the sun, which means that the underwater grasses can't get the sunlight that they need to photosynthesize. But the nitrogen that is coming into these rivers, especially the Severn and the South and the Magathie, places where there isn't a whole lot of agricultural work going on in the watersheds, it's coming from our own lawns. It's coming from fertilizers that are used by people who are seeking to preserve perfect uniform turf grass. And this is my hobby horse. Every time I get in front of a group of people, I've just got to say, the sooner you can get away from the mindset that we all need to have this feudalistic short grass around our castles, the better off all the rivers will be.
John?
So what comes to mind, I guess, and as Noelle, as you recognize, I was in class 12, and I'm trying to remember. I don't remember Jesse or Tom getting in front of us in all the training we had. I know we have a lot of materials to go through, but for me, really seeing this real implications of nutrient overload, nitrogen overload in our rivers, some really concrete, the dead zones. I mean, the things that Tom and Jesse have to offer. I don't know if that's in the curriculum, I'm just not remembering, or if that's something to consider working into the curriculum for watershed stewards. Because for the people on the call that aren't, that familiar with it, I mean, we're trying with watershed stewards, we're trying to teach the people to go out into their communities and help their communities manage stormwater. But really, part of that could be all about, the nitrogen overload from over fertilization.
That's a great point, John. And I think my sense has always been that the course doesn't emphasize it as much as it could, because we're giving people really, really broad strokes. And we're also understanding that there are so many other organizations like SRA, like ARF, like MRA, which are covering this ground and doing that work. So we're offering something different, and we're always connecting people to those organizations if water quality monitoring is something that they really want to specialize in their volunteer work. I also think that just personally, for a lot of outreach that we might be doing to the really, really broad general public that maybe isn't as interested in all of these particular issues as everybody here is tonight, it might just be too much. That might not be the thing that sells somebody on why they reduce the amount of chemicals they're putting on their lawn. It might have to be a different hook. So just something to think about.
Okay. And I want to let Donna Clapp ask her question. If you could unmute her, please. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I just had to reach her. A little awkward situation here. I have two questions. The first one's the most important. Jason Simpson and I are getting together tomorrow or Friday night to start doing some analysis of the water quality data that he's been taking at EYC. And I was wondering if there's any guides, because I mean, I have a background in statistics and lots of math, but I understand that the statistics are only as good as the models that you work in. What are do you have any references I could use to do good analysis? I mean, we have a limited set of data, so I also want to be interested in what we might be able to do better, like the nitrogen level. Sounds like something we should be able to measure pretty easily. I did it at my aquarium for years, but do you have guidelines, and does the WSA or anything have a pamphlet or some kind of reference that we could use?
So yeah, Donna, that's a great question. There's a group called the Mid-Atlantic Tributaries Assessment Coalition, which got together, I want to say like 2009, 2011 timeframe, and put together a document which guides citizen scientists in how to collect data, how to quality control for it, and also once you've got it in hand, how to interpret it and how to decide what constitutes passing and failing. And they put together a good document for that. This was a group of experts from all around the Bay, from academia, regulators, riverkeepers and stuff. I'm putting a link in the chat to their website that
Thanks.
you can navigate to and pull their document. But that is where most of the watershed groups in the Bay have looked to in terms of how to say, okay, we've got these levels, 3 milligrams per liter of oxygen. Does that mean that it's a pass or a fail? Does it mean it's an A or a B or a C? So that kind of stuff, there's a lot of good info in there.
Yeah, so I think our club would just be interested in the impact, maybe our oyster wave wall or even the oyster cages that we're raising, any impact we might have. Is water clarity a good metric? I mean, maybe I'm asking you to do a spoiler on the nice document you've shared, but is that a good metric to start with, since we are just beginning our evaluation stages of the data that's been collected for about 2 years?
I think so. And the reason is, what I kind of touched on a little bit earlier. If you've got better clarity, then that means that the SAV is going to have a better chance of surviving. And SAV photosynthesizes and pumps oxygen into the water column. It provides habitat for juvenile and baby aquatic life. And since it grows close to the shorelines, it attenuates wave action and prevents shoreline erosion. So it really has this host of benefits, and it takes longer. So the reason that, phytoplankton, the algae that cause these blooms are microscopic. They photosynthesize too, but the problem is their lifespan is so short that it creates this wild boom and bust. You think of a line graph of the dissolved oxygen, the amplitude is huge. And that is the problem. That's different from the SAV, which are vascular plants, and they have a much longer life cycle, and their breakdown, once they die, the decomposition process that takes the oxygen out of the water takes a lot longer. So it's a much more gradual kind of wave of the nitrogen being absorbed, and then once they break down, how it re-enters the water column.
It's just like in our bodies, right? If you eat sugar, you get a very big impulse in energy, and then it goes off fast, or
and then
maybe
it crashes.
Yeah, and they crash, and then of course, but if you eat high fiber or complex carbohydrates is better. But anyway, weird enough. But that wasn't my second part. Sorry, my second part is of all this nitrogen that is going into our water. Is there a link to septic systems? And I don't know, maybe that's a lost cause because it's so complex, but I'm curious what you think. And then I'm done.
So yeah, there is, sewage effluent has a good bit of nitrogen in it, and Arundel County has more of a septic system problem than many of the counties in the Bay have. There are over 40,000 septic systems in the county, 20,000 of which the county has identified as likely in need of either being serviced or taken offline and connected to sewer. The Septic Task Force created a report that details a lot of how we can get from here to there, because it's going to be $1.5 billion project to connect all of the septics that the county has identified to sewer, and it's going to take a long time, and the county can't front all that money. So a lot of what we talked about on the Septic Task Force was, how do you finance this? And Councilwoman Jessica Hare from South County put in a bill a year or two ago that kind of created the deferment structure and the financing structure for communities that are interested in getting their communities off of septic and onto sewer. The county has a good website called Our Water, and water is spelled with 2 A's because Anne Arundel, .org. And that's where, if you're interested in getting your neighbors together to get your community off of septic and onto sewer, you can start there, and county engineers and consultants will work with you to talk about how many people in your community you need to reach the critical mass to take the next steps, and provide estimates of cost for each individual property owner.
That's great information, Jesse. Thank you so much. I was checking the chat and I saw that Bill has asked if Back Creek is a lost cause, especially for paddlers. And the Back Creek Conservancy is now a committee of the Severn River Association. So I'll let Tom Gay address that. But before he does, I just wanted to let you know, Bill, in case you don't know, that the city has embarked on a top to bottom comprehensive restoration of both the Back Creek and the Spa Creek watersheds. Most of the work we're doing initially will be in Back Creek watershed. We might do some, spotty projects in Spa Creek as well as we go through Back Creek. But we have hired a company called Greenvest to help us with a lot of the work. They're also helping us develop, identify all of our BMPs, our best management practices, and what condition they're in, and which ones can be saved and which can't, which need to be maintained or cleaned up. But there's several large-scale restoration projects that will incorporate different types of practices, including living shorelines and regenerative step pool conveyances. And one big one that is the Severn Riverkeeper program is addressing is at the SPCA property, and through that property and the creek there all the way down to Back Creek, and they're putting a living shoreline in there. They're in the design phase right now and have applied to the Chesapeake Bay Trust for additional funding to connect into a creek that ties into the SPCA property that originates around Mariners Point. And also the city is working on upstream of SPCA project in the Timber Creek community and in the Ambridge community. And those are just 4 projects that we are working on design right now. So we are completely committed, the city is completely committed to an overall restoration of all the watersheds, but we're starting with Back Creek and Spa Creek. So I'll let Tom jump into there.
Is Back Creek a lost cause? No, I wouldn't say that at all. I don't know what Back Creek was like, a generation ago, but just based on our water quality monitoring program, which last year was our first year in Back Creek, the water wasn't all that bad. It was on par with the other creeks around here. I would say some of the creeks further up, stream from the Route 50 bridge are in much worse shape. There's a bit of dead zone in Back Creek from time to time, but it came and went rather quickly. Whereas the mid-river creeks, they had dead zones all the time over long stretches of time. So I wouldn't write off Back Creek at all. We don't do bacteria. That would be Tammy Demansky's expertise. But as far as oxygen, salinity levels, Back Creek's okay. It's not bad.
Okay. I wanted to mention a couple of other projects in Back Creek. The Maritime Museum's education campus on Back Creek put in a fairly extensive restoration project around their parking lot and down around the circle that goes right up to the building and through the woods. They completed that earlier this year. No, perhaps that was the end of last year. And they have, the city staff were out there a few months ago to talk to the Maritime Museum about submitting another grant proposal to DNR to build a living shoreline at the same location to tie into the work they already did. They are doing some further evaluation of that proposal because the neighboring communities and marinas are thinking about kicking in some participation with the Maritime Museum. So they will likely think about a little bit more what they're going to do there, but it will be most likely a living shoreline.
Why would they need a living shoreline in that pond?
Not in in Back Creek, not in a pond. Oh, you're saying the pond is in Back Creek.
Well, I know where the Maritime Museum is right next to my office, so I
Right.
see their building, so I see the
So they
pond.
wanted-
I'm
they
just
want
curious.
to tie in the work they've already done all the way to the shoreline. There is some work that was done there, living shoreline work, some years ago. It wasn't maintained properly, or perhaps it wasn't designed for the type of wave action they've been receiving. So they wanted to build it all the way around that cove to complete it out. I want to address a question that came up in the chat, and it's from Kenyatta Rao, who also serves on the Environmental Commission. And you may know Ms. Randy Rao as well. He's asking, what are your organizations doing in bringing social equity into environmental restoration? So any of our panelists, if you want to jump in.
And Amy, I saw you typed an answer, but your answer doesn't get to Facebook unless you speak now.
So Amy, go ahead.
So Spot Creek is working with the Greater Parole Community Association to green up Outer West Street and the Parole community, because they really want trees added to their community for beautification, as well as relieving some of the heat effect and for stormwater benefits. And so that's our newest foray into or partnership, I should say, with the parole community. And we will probably be doing lots more projects with them. We've already done a lot of projects in parole, but that's the historical start of Spa Creek. So the headwaters, it doesn't go up that far anymore, but that's where it used to go. So we know the folks there really want to help the creek, and we want to help make sure their neighborhood looks as beautiful as lots of the other neighborhoods.
So with Arundel Rivers, we have started to integrate social equity lens into our hiring practices. And so whereas before there were a few kind of traditional channels, if we had a job opening or when we were seeking summer interns, that we would go to Chesapeake Network and things like that, we've started to put priority on outreach to historically Black colleges and universities, for instance, in putting out job postings and internship opportunities to try and diversify our candidate pool for when we have work and when we have jobs that we want to do. We've put in a couple of grant proposals over the past couple of months, basically since the beginning of winter, for projects that that if funded will have a diversity aspect to them that is about outreach and education and trying to expand opportunities and access for the water and education through work, through paid positions with our organization to again, to diversify our own talent pool and also to make our outreach and education efforts more than the kind of one-off group event day where we meet a bunch of people and then we never see anybody again. These would be the sorts of sort of like a sustained micro internship over a period of several weeks where we would be working with partners in historically underserved communities to provide outreach or to provide hands-on training opportunities for mostly high school age students. So that's what we're doing in our shop.
Could I ask a question? I remember Jesse a few years ago, I think at one of the Waterways Cabinet meetings, Archie Trader talked to you and to me about our groups possibly doing something with his parks program. You know, I don't remember if we talked about like boat rides or I mean, I don't know if you followed up with him. I don't remember if I ever did, but nothing came of that.
Yeah,
and
I I gave Archie names of all of your organizations and others to before more engagement. And Tom's waving because I hooked Archie and Tom up with the floating classrooms program, and which they're going to get. I think COVID put a little delay in what they're going to do, but Archie went out with Tom on the Severn River, and Tom and Archie brainstormed what they can do with Stanton Center kids and the kids who are in the after school and summer camp programs at Pitt Moyer in the city. I was going to ask Noelle, is WSA doing any targeted outreach to include lower income participants or participants of color in the Watershed Stewards Academy?
Yes, absolutely. This past year with COVID and knowing that communities of color were so disproportionately affected by the effects of COVID, it felt very hard knowing that our class had not really shifted in the ways I think it needs to in order to be attractive to and accessible to people in different communities to take. We did not do as much outreach as I'd wanted to, but that's something that we're definitely thinking about. We know that the model that we've had for the last decade is a model that works for certain communities, but it doesn't work for all communities in this county. And if we need to reach different communities, we need to think about changing that model. And we're hoping that the DEIJ consultants who come on to work with us, hopefully starting later this year, are really going to be able to help the organization grow, give us strategies for how we can better be serving all the communities in Anne Arundel County, because these communities were not all created equally. These communities do not all have the same access to water. They do not all have the same relationship to water. And we need to understand that and appreciate that and listen to what the needs of those communities are before we aggressively go in and try to recruit them for what we're currently offering, because in some ways it might not currently be the right fit for them. But we're still doing all the same work that we've been doing to help communities that have not been engaged as strongly with watershed organizations historically to be more engaged with environmental efforts. Just last week, we were fortunate enough to be able to broker a conversation between the Chesapeake Bay Trust and a community that we've had a long-standing connection with since 2014 that unfortunately has not had great success securing grant funds for restoration work that they desperately need help for. To me, that felt like work that needed to be done, making that conversation happen, making sure that those partners were in the room and got to see each other, well, in a virtual space, face to face, listen about what the needs were, and really think about what that partnership between the trust and between this community could be going forward. I feel like it's a privilege to be able to do that kind of work for WSA. And I just hope that as we continue our efforts in DEIJ, we're able to grow and engage more of the communities that we want to be able to reach.
Okay, and I'll say for the city, we're making a greater effort to identify projects and needs in some of our more vulnerable communities, our communities of color, our low-income communities. I mean, we have plans to address some of the worst problems we already know about. When those are priority programs, but nonprofits come to us and communities come to us and say, this is a horrible problem in my backyard or my community. But it's often the lower income communities and communities of color don't do that. They don't know about our resources, or they're working hard at multiple jobs sometimes and they don't have time. And so we know it's incumbent upon us as city staff to make a greater effort to seek out the issues and the vulnerabilities in these communities. So we're very much dedicated to doing that. One program we did initiate last year, we were working with BG&E and the Smart Electric Power Alliance on a study of resilience hubs for Newtown 20, which is a public housing project which has been demolished and is going to be rebuilt. So we are looking at how to make that community more energy efficient and a clean, reliable energy by installing solar for that community. That was a study that was done. It was found that the community alone would not be cost effective to just install it for that community. We would have to go reach out to a broader area surrounding it to make it cost effective. But we're looking at all of our low-income housing communities and looking at how we can improve them, the buildings for energy efficiency, resilient power backup sources such as solar, making the buildings more energy efficient, putting in trees for cooling, shade, and aesthetics. So we're looking at all different ways we can improve those communities that might not come to us, but we also want to empower them with programs like the mayor's work program Annapolis and Replant Annapolis, and find ways to better engage them. One point I want to bring up is the city for the first time entered into an agreement with the Chesapeake Bay Trust to fund projects in the city that the trust would administer and manage, just as Anne Arundel County has been doing for a number of years. This was our first year in. We put $300,000 into it. We went on about 11 site visits from communities and nonprofits that contacted us, and 6 applications were submitted. We are looking to fund about 4 of those. We'll make final decisions soon. But that was another area where we saw we might need to do more outreach and education to bring in lower income communities and communities of color to submit applications, and what sort of support do we need to provide to them to complete applications, because it's not an easy process, even for me, and I've done a lot of grant applications. It's very time consuming, it's very technical. And also we didn't have any faith-based organizations submit any applications. So one person I'm going to reach out to is Jody Rose with the Interfaith Partners. But any ideas anyone has on this call to get faith-based communities involved and lower income communities involved, I would be happy to hear from you. Diane. Diane, you're on mute.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to read a question that came in from Facebook from Judy Billage. She's asking about the area behind the post office on Bag Creek. The trees are falling into the water and the shoreline is falling away. So I think she's referring to the fact that there are a lot of invasive species that are impacting those trees. Does the city have a program to maintain its current tree canopy?
Yes, we do. And I know that the community that lives there has already reached out to our Public Works Department to work with them to not only do a restoration of the outfall that's right there, but also the community itself wants to do the invasive removal. And that's something we need to follow up with them on.
So I just want yeah, so what you should know, I guess, is important to know is that that's all, that forest at 6.7 acres is owned by or managed by the Annapolis Conservancy Board. And they just haven't had the manpower or money. So right. It's really, that's causing the issue. So we're just hoping that we don't lose that, because there's so little forest left in Annapolis. I think that's what we're referring to. Right, and then it's so important to get those vines down. It's easily done. I mean, there's a lot of trees to clip, but you just clip them at the bottom and the vines die off. But thank you for bringing that up, Judy, because I will follow up with Mike Johnston, the Director of Public Works. The mayor and I were out on a site walk with the stormwater engineers there about a year ago, and the community has expressed interest in taking down the invasives to work with us on that. And I know that we're a little bit beyond 8:30, and Virginia, I know, wants to wrap us up. I'll take one more question if anybody has any other questions out there. And if you see any on Facebook, Diane, let me know.
I have a question.
Yes, Virginia.
I just want to know if there's any, I'm hearing some common themes in all the remarks tonight. It certainly seems like we need to look at the social justice equity thing, and there might be an opportunity for collaboration in that area. And also in the area of specifically working with identifying opportunities for engagement of youth in a substantive manner, as Jesse mentioned, not just a one-time shot, and I'm wondering if there's any thoughts of ways we could all collaborate on those 2 issues specifically. Any final thoughts from the panelists on collaborative opportunities?
Virginia, I can share that there is going to be a collaborative opportunity coming up because of Kate Fritz's work with the Alliance. The Alliance, in coordination with some WSA staff and Arundel Rivers Federation, is looking to put together a meeting of watershed organizations in Anne Arundel that can help us better connect, better understand where we're all at in our different organizations' DEIJ journeys, and figure out how we can work together to get this right. Because social justice and environmental justice, they're inextricable. And in order to do this work, we need to be doing it together, not separately.
Okay, excellent. I'm so glad to hear that. And also I was going to mention too, the panelists are all members of the Mayor's Waterways Cabinet. And this will be, those two issues I will put on the agenda for the next meeting that I'm trying to schedule for June. So excellent points. And if there's, I don't think there's any more questions. If Diane and John aren't seeing any more, I didn't see any more in the chat. I will thank everyone for participating, both the public and all of your questions, and especially our panelists who do such great work every day. I so much appreciate all of you and all the work you've been doing. And I would thank Eastport Yacht Club as well for hosting this presentation tonight, and Virginia Tippie for organizing all of us.
Well, and John, thank you.
And John,
all. Thank you to the panelists.
Okay, Virginia, anything else before you can wrap us up?
Oh, I just want to say thank you to the panelists for their time tonight. And I know we've had more people also joining us on Facebook, as we could see from the questions coming in. I really appreciate your time. And I think we'll try to send out a little bit of a summary of some key ideas that came out of the discussions and the presentations. So please, as you have additional thoughts, share them with me. I know John and I are going to try to figure out what this all means. But I can tell, I for one can say, I learned a lot just listening to what all the different organizations are doing and getting updated on their activities. And thank you very much for your time. John, do you want to add anything too?
No, what you said. Thank you, everybody. And we're a little bit over our time, but it was worth it. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
All right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Happy Earth Day.
Happy Earth Day.